All right, today we're going to be going over Lesson 8, direct variation. Now, direct variation is when two quantities have a constant ratio, okay? So direct variation is basically a way that we can write an equation for the different types of linear or straight line graphs that we've been looking at in class. So when we're talking about direct variation, we're going to be focusing on the equation y equals mx, okay? Where m represents a constant, which in this case is going to be our slope or our constant rate of change. Okay, so now we ask ourselves, how do we find that constant or the slope or the constant rate of change? Well, you may have realized in your investigation that we can actually find slope of a proportionate line, so a line that's a linear line that goes through the origin. We can simply find the slope by y over x, okay? We also can find the slope or the constant rate of change by using that slope formula of y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, okay? Now, if we look at some examples of direct variation equations, here's some examples. We could have y equals 7x. We might ask ourselves, in this case, what is the slope or the constant rate of change? And it's 7. Here's another example. Y equals 2/5 times x. In this case, our slope or our constant rate of change is 2/5. Here's another one. Y equals negative 3x. Now, since we've got a negative slope here of negative 3, that actually means on our graph that our line is going to be going in the downward direction instead of the upward direction. Here's another example. Y equals negative 1/4 times x. All of these are direct variation equations where we're taking a constant rate of change and we're multiplying it by x. So, in the equation, y equals 10x represents the amount of money y Julio earns for x hours. Identify the constant rate of change and what that means. So our constant rate of change, or our slope in this case, is 10. Now we can write this as a fraction of 10 over 1. And we remember from our y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 that our numerator is representative of the y variable, and our denominator is representative of the x variable. So in this case, since we have that y represents the amount of money that Julio earns for work, we can explain our slope as Julio earns $10 per 1 hour of work. And there we go. We've just explained our constant rate of change or our slope. So now we're going to ask ourselves, if y varies directly with x, we want to write an equation for the direct variation. Then we want to find each missing value. Okay, so this is a two-part question. In these questions, we first need an equation, and then we second need to find missing values. So I'm going to show you how to do this. If y is 15 when x is 9, find y when x is 33. So I like to write this out in coordinate points. So I might say that x is 9 when y is 15, and I'm trying to find y, so I don't know y, when x is 33. So do you see how I wrote these out almost in points, as if we were to graph this relationship, 9, 15 would be a coordinate point, and 33, whatever this value is, would be a point on our linear line. Okay, so now I want to go ahead and I want to find this direct variation equation, which means I need to find my slope, or my m. Okay, now it's kind of hard to use the slope formula in this case because we've got a missing value. So since we're looking at just proportional lines right now, we're going to use m equals y over x. So now I'm going to look at which point do I have where I know y and I know x? Well, that's this point, 9 and 15. So I'm going to say that my m then is equal to 15, because that's my y value, over 9, because that's my x value. Okay, now I can actually go ahead and simplify this down because they're both divisible by 3, which means my slope is 5 over 3. Now I can go through and write my direct variation equation by saying y equals m, which is really 5/3, times x. And I right there have an equation. Okay? Now, remember that the first part of my question asked me to write an equation. My second part asked me to find the missing values. The easiest way to find the missing values is to simply set this up using a proportion, okay? So given that we've been using y's in the numerator, I'm gonna use y's in the numerator of my proportion. This does not look like a y, there we go. All right, so I'm gonna put the y's on top, 15 and question mark, over the x's, which 15 over 9, and question mark over 33, okay? Now all I have to do is simply solve my proportion. I can take 15 times 33, which, give me a minute, equals 495, and then I can take 495 and I can divide that by, so I'm multiplying these numbers, I can divide that by the number that's left over, so divided by 9, and I get 55, which means that I know that the missing y is equal to 55. So there you go, I found my equation and I found my missing value. Now, if you want to go ahead and try the next one on your own, go ahead and do so. You can pause the video now and then you can come back to the video as soon as you're ready to check your answer. For those of you that want to go through an example with me, I'm going to go through it right now. So it says find x, so I don't know x, when y is 72, if y is 48 when x is 4. So again, I'm going to write these out as coordinate points. I don't know x when y is 72, and I know that y is 48 when x is 4. Okay, so now I've got xy pairs. So first thing that I want to do is I want to write my equation, which is y equals m times x. So I got to find my m, or my slope. In order to find my m, again, I'm going to use this formula because I'm missing one of the x's, so I can't do x2 minus x1. So I'm going to use this constant formula right here of y over x. So in this case, I look at which pair I have both x and y, and it's going to be the pair on the right. So I'm going to take y, which is 48, and I'm going to set it over x, which is 4. Now I know that I can go ahead and simplify these because these numbers are both divisible by 4. And I know that I'm going to have 12 on top and 1 on bottom, which then really just simplifies down to 12. So now if I was to write my formula, y equals m times x, I can write it as y equals 12 times x. okay? You could also write it in fraction form if that's helpful, but we do prefer it in simplified form. Now, the second part is to find the missing values. So again, I'm going to go back to my original coordinate points, and I'm just going to set these up as a proportion, okay? I like to put y's on top, but if you put the two x's on top, it should not matter. So I'm going to put the y's on top, which is 72 over the x, or the question mark, is equal to 48 over 4. Now I'm going to multiply my numbers that are diagonal from each other. 72 times 4 equals 288. Then I'm going to divide by the number that's left over. So I'm going to take 288 divided by 48. And I get an answer of 6. So I know that my missing x variable is equal to 6. And I have my two answers there. All right, go ahead and try the back two examples on your own. I will post the answer key to this on Google Classroom so that you can check your answers on your own.